first I wanted to talk about, since this will be a little faster, talk about like the reference here versus like the image. And I know like the image isn't finished, but I just wanted to talk about some, like I have some insight because working on Rio and Rio 2, there's kind of like unique challenges when you're dealing with birds, and it's kind of like a strange thing that you're not really expecting. So I figured I would talk about that, and hopefully let's see, who was it? Yeah, Mickey sees this and gets some insight from it. So yeah, any reference you find for your work is fine, as long as it fits within your, like what you're looking for, color-wise or shape language-wise or whatever it is. The only thing with birds is like it can be hard to like feel the shaping on them. From afar, like the bird here looks very flat, and for the most part it is. It's kind of like very ambiently lit, but where you kind of introduce your shaping is in the specular, so like you have like some specular hits here on the shoulder from some skylight, even here, like, this is kind of like a mix of specular and, like diffuse and, some subsurface and stuff like that. And then when you look at the fur, or like the feathers and the chest area here, it's really bright. They just take light really, really well. So it's like the first thing I was seeing here was just how dark this seemed. And then the other thing that I was seeing was that, this kind of feels like fur and not so much like feathers. And that's another thing. Like if you're creating your own, like setup, it can be a little hard to make sure that it looks like feathers. So I would just be careful of that, when you're doing something like this, and make sure that everything looks kind of how it's supposed to, and then just keep in mind that like the white part of birds, and anything, like fuzzy like birds like this, if it was like colorful, they tend to just look like the color, and like you have to introduce shape like in strange ways, and you can't like let the bird go too dark or it starts to look, dirty, kind of like what's happening here, And I'm not saying like this looks dirty, but it just looks like it doesn't have that like airy lightness to it. It looks really like thick, kind of like a beard. So just something to keep in mind. And then the other thing was I looked at some toucan, like just some other images here, and I just wanted to point out that you can see it, every one of these images, it's like there's not much shadow in that like white area. Like here I can see some, but really like when you look at the whole thing, it doesn't have much. So you have to be really careful about like what's in shadow and what isn't, and your fill levels have to be like dramatically higher than it would be for like a character. Otherwise it tends to look like strange. But yeah. And then the other thing is like, you'll always have like, the local color will kind of like spill out. So you got to kind of make sure that it reads well, and that the beak is reading as it should. So that's like the bright kind of orangey color, and it's funny. It's like, unless you're seeing like a sheen like this, you're generally seeing kind of a very similar looking beak in all the images. And it's like there is shadow, but again, like it's kind of like it's very hollow inside. It's not completely hollow, but there is a lot of light spilling through, so you won't really see like a dark looking beak, generally speaking. So yeah, just keep that in mind while you're while you're working on this. But I think it's a good start. I think your choices like making the background a little darker is fine. But I'm not going to comment on this because it looks like you have a lot of work left. But just keep those two things in mind. It's like specular for the shaping on the bird, and the fur, especially the light part, has to be kind of like really well filled, and you don't want it feeling, you just want to try to make sure it doesn't feel like hair. Okay, moving on to the next thing that was submitted. Let me just check real quick, make sure no one else submitted anything else. Yep, that's it. So I'm gonna try to figure out which set goes with what, because I'm having a bit of a hard time. I think these two go together. Let me go back, because I don't want to get it wrong. So, okay, no, so it's this one and that one. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing I see here is, I'm trying to ignore the window because, it just, to me, it just reads like an image painted there. Like it might as well just not be a window and kind of like like some kind of poster, of a street. But so I'm just trying to look at like what's coming in, and right away I can see like a few things. Number one, the color of the lighting is a little off. So I would make sure that like the colors are kind of matching. So that's why I feel like maybe that one's midday. Okay. So if I just stick a grade here and I just mess with the gain a little bit. So just like adding a little bit of red into this, gets you like, so much closer to this look. And then generally across all three of your frames, I wanted to say that like, well, I guess two of your frames where you have what looks like sunlight coming in, is that, generally when you look at your reference here, one of the things I pick out is just how bright the sun is. It's kind of like a note that you'll get a lot, where the sun needs to feel like the sun. It should always be your brightest source if it's in your scene. So like certain parts of your scene can go, depending on where you're exposing for, like can go like overexposed and blown out. So just looking over here, like a lot of this, the light coming in from the outside to me doesn't read like sunlight. And, I'm not even sure that it is. Like this light here could be coming from the ceiling. But I see like this light here that looks like it's coming, in. So it makes me feel like the sunlight's kind of really tall coming in and shadowing them on the floor. In your reference here, the sunlight's coming like almost straight into the room. So you don't see like shadows like onto the floor. You actually see shadows onto the wall from the window. So I would try like for a look like that. Which is kind of why like I felt like this one was the one that mimicked that light. And I think it might actually be, because that, but either way, I feel like, some of the coloring needs to be adjusted, because when I add the red in, I feel like I immediately get like just that much closer to that. The other thing I'll say is that, in your scene here, you have these lights. These lights compared to what the sun is doing will always be like, orders of magnitude less. So when you do stuff like this, you won't really you know, when the sun's coming in and lighting up the room, you'll never feel these, but you can use them as sources to like fill your characters and things like that. So what I mean is like, let me see if I can get a better frame here. Maybe this is the one where the sunlight's coming through. Yeah, so let's try like a little like test here to, I'm just gonna do it on, let's see, this one. So it's gonna be hard because again, I keep, you know, I say this a lot, but just every video you'll probably hear me saying this is like, I can't deal with these frames the way you would if you had like an EXR. So like some of the like gaining and stuff like that won't look good. But you know, in general, for a shot like this, you probably need it more red, and then I'd expect it to be like a little brighter, just overall. You know, like this is a brown couch, or like a kind of a darkish couch, and you can see just how much light it's getting in there. So I would expect that, you know, the light's coming in so much that it's kind of bouncing everywhere. So I would really kind of expect your scene to look somewhere like that in the fills, maybe higher. And then like if you're feeling, you know, like you need more, so maybe something like this, you know, like your sunlight really should be a lot brighter, unless you're exposing for it, in which case everything else will get brighter. So that's kind of like, you need to define for yourself how, you know, how that's gonna work. So yeah, the two things that help for me is like when I see shadow, like bright areas like that, and like long shadows, or you know, sharp shadows, that kind of reads to me like sunlight. So just make sure that, you know, you set something up like that. I think this one is the midday one. So the image you gave was this one. I'm sorry, it's like really small for some reason. But this one seems like more ambiently filled, which means that, you know, there is no sun, and that your windows are just providing this like, you know, big ambient lighting. And you can tell because there's a few like key things you can see. It's like, one, the color's really like flat and white, you know, or I guess you could throw it in the blue a little bit. The other thing is that you see that the table itself has like a very kind of soft shadow. Like you know, like I don't see like a hard edge or anything like that, you know, or even the lights coming off of these guys aren't really casting. It's hard to tell, but it just seems softer to me. So I would say this is kind of like a very like diffuse look. So looking through these ones, I feel like maybe this was the one that you were trying to do diffuse. And in those cases, I think what you need is like a big, you know, body of light coming through this window. I think it's always going to be difficult, you know, when you have like these kinds of backgrounds where, you know, it's just a texture placed on there, because it's really hard to make that look like something. But if you want to add some realism to it, what you need to do is, if you look at your image here, you can see that the outside is kind of overexposed, you know. So I would expect your exterior here to go to like blow out, and then instead of having these like really hard shadows down here, they should be really soft. Like your light source when the sun is gone is just like the sky, and you could just think of, you know, it's kind of like a dome light, right? Like that's a huge light source, and it's just going to give you the softest shadows, you know, that you could possibly get. And even that light is brighter than like some of these, you know, lights. So that should be like your main light coming in. I'm gonna just I'm gonna do some weird stuff here, but I just want to illustrate. point. Plants. Okay. Not being super accurate because I just want to quickly illustrate this. And let me get these ones too. So I think it'll help. I'm going to leave those out. So if I then kind of go here and I start, blowing these out, and like that, and then what I can do is, and I'll show you what I'm doing in a second. I know some of you asked to see things. Okay, so what I did was I just graded the outside using a roto for the window. I just made it a lot brighter, and then I took a blur of this roto and I screened it on top, and what that's doing for me is just adding that kind of lighting spill that's coming in through the window. And I just feel like right away, you can feel the difference between sorry, let me just I just want to blur it out so that we're not getting this weirdness on his face here. So right away you can feel just how much more naturalistic this looks, to having light come in from the outside. I would even snag a bit of a blur and kind of just blur your outside a little bit, not a ton, but just enough so that it fuzzes some of the details out. You don't want to read anything that's happening out there, but anyway, you can see just how much this just makes it feel like they're standing in front of a bright window, and we're exposing for what is actually the dark part of their faces, right? It's there's a big body of light coming in from the outside, and that body of light is going to be your key, and you want to see the dark part of their body, so the dark part of their face. So that's what you're bringing your middle gray to that level, and that's going to blow out the outside, because that light is just super bright. So to me, this looks more like they're standing in front of a big window than it did before. And it was just such a it was just such a quick, fix to do something like that. And then, you want this to have some fog coming in, so that's kind of what this is mimicking. But if you had some fog coming in, and then if your So now that I have the roto, I can invert it, and I can sort of like mess with like what's happening inside, and like maybe you want to change the color so that it's like a little more neutral, so you can like pull the red out, and then I feel like you're kind of approaching that look a little bit more. And obviously there's no like fog here, you don't have to do something like that, but it's just like the feeling of looking at something bright and trying to focus on like the dark parts. Like in this case you're looking at the whole restaurant, that there's probably a lot of trees out here, you're not really seeing like the sky or anything like that, and so you're not getting a lot of that fog or like that atmosphere, but anyway, I hope that illustrates like where I think some of the issues are. Again, like these lights down, whatever's coming in here, if it's kind of this overcast look, and I'm sorry if I got it wrong. As for like what each thing is, I'm just following like this here and this here were posted together. So hopefully I'm correct. But yeah, so I just think you need a little bit more like brightness and like more of that soft light coming in. It will really define how you look. These are fine, these lights here, I think they're fine, and you can use them as accents on your character. So you can, if I go back to your main lighting here, you can actually give like a nice little like rim hit from this light, like not super bright, but just enough to give a little bit of interest and color. Same thing with this guy, you can just give a little bit there, but really the main source of light is going to be the light coming in from outside, and then whatever's kind of bouncing back at them from that light, which is going to be kind of a lower level. So I think whenever you're looking at reference, you have to really study the shapes. Again, I'm sorry, like this is really low level, but you can see like that the back of this character has like a lot of light from the window, and then the front of it is kind of filly, but it's still dark, but there's no like sharp shadows or anything like that. Nothing that's like spilling in directly. So try to mimic that like softness through this, and if you have to like put a light out here and have it like ignore these, then like do that and see how it goes. But I would expect like that light to like cast on top of this over here and like hit them real nice and soft, and like hit this stuff, and all those shadows coming in shouldn't be like this hard. Like this shadow to me reads like it's coming from this, but if you had that bright of an exterior, you wouldn't really read this shadow that dark. You might see it if you were really close. Like I don't know if you've ever been to like a restaurant where they have like overhead lighting and outside lighting, and then you can kind of see like low level shadows. You might see it, but that light coming from the outside should really overtake anything that you're like any of these lights that you're doing outside. I would definitely let me see if I can. So what you can do is search so you can search like lumens of lights, and like my wording may be wrong here, but yeah, so here you go. So if you look at the source here, your sunlight is about 100,000 lumens, and like a light in your living room is about 50. there was like some calculation I did a long time ago. Oh yeah, here it is. This is a better one, lux. So it's like direct sunlight is 100,000 lux, and then your street lighting is 10. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with like the brightness is like and yeah, like this isn't direct sunlight, but still like street lighting and any kind of lamp that you might have, like office desk lighting, is gonna like pale in comparison to like a lot of like natural lighting that you might get. So just keep that in mind when you're like breaking down like what's where and how bright is it, and I think like newer lighters have a tendency to underplay their sunlight and then overplay like bulbs and stuff like that, and that's fine, but you have to realize like where are you like getting direct sunlight? If yes, then like those bulbs won't really do as much for you. And then if you're not getting direct sunlight or like natural lighting, so if you're like in interior or if it's at night or something like that, then those bulbs really start to shine and take on their own like importance into your frame. So just keep that in mind. It's like one of those things that I think people miss. Yeah, and then so again, like even with this one going back, I feel like the same thing. You'd want like a brighter image out here, just to mimic like what's going on. Like if I look at the street here, a lot of the street is not getting sunlight, and it's like the sun's just peeking over, and it's hitting this building, but it's not hitting down here. You can kind of mimic that in a way, but it's hard because they're on the floor level, so you like that sun's gonna have to hit something out here. So you can kind of like increase the sunlight or find like a different image that's like brighter or that time of day and stick that in here. It'll help you sell like what's happening inside. So sometimes I've seen these before, and sometimes I feel like it's better to do like an interior one with this set, where you just convert these windows to be, like a wall or something. Only because you get away from that issue of like, well, what's outside, and how do I make that look realistic? But a lot of these are just you getting your bearings and lighting, and that's fine. Like if you did something like this where you just took it, you got the ID in comp or something like that, and you boosted it, that's fine. It's just for you to like figure out, the balancing of lights compared to one another. This one here, so this is your nighttime scene, and I see this as your reference, and I think you're like getting the right idea, right? It's like dark outside. These are the lights that are kind of giving you the most illumination. But I'm still seeing like this light here, and one of the things I notice in this frame is that, again, like there's so many small little lights everywhere that all the shadows are kind of being filled in. So when you look at like some of these characters, or I call them characters, but these people, when you look at some of them, it's like you can't really tell like where any like source is coming from, and that's just because every one person in here has probably 10 or 20 lights surrounding them and like filling in all the shadows. So there probably are shadows. This is probably like one of those cases where, if you put your hand above the table, you'd see like 6 shadows, from every single one of those lights. But what I'm getting at is like there needs to be this like ambient like level of like base lighting in here that you're going to get. So one of the things I would expect on this one is, if you were matching this, and a large portion of like why this is so red inside is due to like how the person who took this picture, like where their I always forget this, where their color temperature was set to. So like if I if I grab like an exposure node and I just like pull some red out. Oh wait, sorry. Whoops. Oh boy. Okay, so if I pull some red out and then some green out, like you can start to like, you can start to get to like a sort of more like neutral color scheme. It's not super important, but I just wanted you to know that like there's like a reason why this is like so warm. And one of the best ways for you guys to look at it is to go to your scope and you go to your waveform, and when you're looking at this waveform, you can kind of like put it on the side here, and then when you're playing with your exposure node, right, so you're playing with this node here, you can then like see like what your values are doing. And when you like line your values up correctly, like especially with an EXR, it's kind of hard to do it here. When you like line your values up correctly, like you can get to like a more neutral look. That's like an aside. Sometimes I just like to show people this because it can help you like figure out what is actually happening in your scene. Like if I go back to this, you can see how much more red there is in your scene than any other color. So just keep that in mind when you're like analyzing stuff. But when I look at this, I feel like there needs to be just a lot more color overall, and it needs to be, that kind of orangey color. And instead of getting like hard shadows like this, and like you can get a few hard shadows, especially like from things, but like I don't know like what's actually casting this. It looks like there's a light coming in from the outside. But I suspect that if you were going for like a nighttime look, even like this one, that, there isn't much of like an exterior light spilling in, and it's all kind of internal. Like, maybe there's some light hitting her from the window, but it's not what's like jumping out at me at first look. So I would try hard to like get that color to match, whichever way you can. Sorry. So I'm just like throwing some gain in here with some red and green to get to that color. Maybe like, and it's like it's hard for me to like with just the gain to like get you there. But I think what you need to do is, instead of it just being these two lights, you need to think about what's off screen, like what's behind the camera, because there are probably more bulbs somewhere in this referenced thought that you have here, and you need to like kind of get that lighting in there. So I would kind of get like, you need like an interior dome or something like that that's going to give you this ambient like base lighting, and then these lights can again act like a rim, a kick on the character, like a fill, stuff like that, to get you to that look. So I would, if you have a key like coming in from like a street light, I would actually just get rid of that completely, and instead the lighting coming from the outside should again, I would just like make it like one simple light coming in softly from the outside, just like think of like a street outside, and then that's just coming in. In some cases, like if you're lighting a shot like on a film or something like that, they might have like, here's a street light, and that street light is casting into the room. But in those cases, I think usually the room is really dark, and you can feel that street light streaming through. Otherwise, if you have your, if you're in your own room and you have your lights on, you're not really feeling the street light coming in, and you're not really seeing shadows from it. Car lights are kind of like a different thing that you might, um, but I just feel like you need to have like a more static, soft light coming from the outside that's like really low level, and then in on the inside you want kind of like an ambient dome, like overall, like average these lights hitting everything, have that as one light, and then use accent lights to give like a rims and kicks to characters to make them look nice and appealing, and whatever it is that so that like we don't lose like her face and stuff like that. um I do think this is like a really kind of difficult set in general to light on. It's hard to get like uh good results, and I think a large part of that is because of like what's this like outside image. um so you just gotta like do your best, but yeah, the notes for this one is like try to get an ambient level of lighting inside, use these lights as like kicks and rims. Try to get rid of this like shadow here, and just make the lighting really nice and soft like everywhere. um, this one here we talked about like getting that exterior kind of lit, and then even here like I see this like shadow line here, and it kind of looks like a sunlight or something. I'm not sure like what's causing this because it's soft up here but harsh here. I would, like if your lighting is coming in from the sky, like you would just feel light like against this wall the whole way, top to bottom, spilling in. And you'd get like a ramp, like a bright to dark ramp. Um, and then for this one, I would just like make your sunlight brighter, match the color as much as you can, and like check out like fill levels in your reference. So like the fill of this, like I know it's not the same as human skin, but it's close enough that you can get some information out of it. So on the left side you see sunlight, on the top side you see this like again skylight, this ambient skylight that's coming in, and then on the back side you see like the interior fill. This is like light that's kind of bouncing back from the room, from the light that's coming in. So the cat's like a good reference point too. Like sunlight's coming in here, this is your fill level here, and then the top of the cat has a little bit more light because he's getting lit by the sky. So keep that in mind as you're working, and try to like incorporate that shaping onto your characters as well, because I feel like your characters have a little too much like fill, not enough like sunlight, and definitely not enough like ambient lighting coming from this big window. um, so yeah, that's